Tonight, supermarket giant Woolworths suffers a loss of almost $1 billion.
Aussie travellers on high alert in Bali. New information suggests a terror attack is imminent.
The world's best big wave surfers drop in for a perfect Pacific storm.
And the Newcastle Knights make NRL history, naming 3 captains.
This is NBN News with Natasha Beyersdorf and Paul Lobb.
Good evening. Tourists are being urged to rethink trips to Indonesia after a warning from our government that terrorists are in the advanced stages of planning a new attack. Popular areas of Bali, Lombok and Jakarta all come with increased risk from returning Islamist fighters from Syria. The Manning dairy industry could soon lead the way in using clean green energy after signing an agreement with AGL today. They'll work together to cut costs while improving sustainability.
With the mercury rising across the mid-north coast over the past couple of days, emergency services have been on high alert. Warmer temperatures have created ideal conditions for fires. It comes after the Rural Fire Service decided last week to end the bushfire danger period early in
We haven't had this season at all. We've got some tow bans around and we've got some very high to high fire dangers at the moment. Yeah, it gives us a little bit of concern that people just be careful.
The weather has also kept paramedics busy.
An Air Force student who lost his hand in a horrific bus accident last year has returned to the air. North Coast man Nathan Parker, who now has a prosthetic limb, says his recovery was driven by the chance to get back in the cockpit.
It's been dubbed the Whoopie Monster, weighing in at more than 1 kilogram. It's a whopping burger being served up at a Woolgoolga takeaway. Overnight, it's created a stir on social media.
Coming up, another mass shooting in the US. A disgruntled worker has gone on a shooting rampage in Kansas, killing 3 workmates and injuring 15 others. Police say the gunman, a 38-year-old man who may have been recently sacked, picked his targets at random.
Ahead in the news, football's scandal-plagued ruling body voting for a new boss.
And Premier Baird backs another medicinal cannabis trial.
The BBC failed to stop decades of sexual abuse by Jimmy Savile because of a culture of fear, an inquiry has found. The report claims staff were reluctant to speak to managers about complaints.
Celebrities were treated with kid gloves and were virtually untouchable. One witness told me that the talent were more valuable to the BBC than their own values.
Savile abused 72 victims at the network between the 1960s and 1980s, but died in 2011 without ever facing charges.
It's been a difficult year for the World Game, and tonight 5 candidates are vying to replace Sepp Blatter as the head of FIFA. The former president stood down amid a corruption scandal, and now it's just hours until delegates vote in his successor. Of the 5 candidates, the frontrunners are Europe's Gianni Infantino and Asia's Sheikh Salman.
A cannabis capsule could provide desperately needed relief for chemotherapy patients who suffer nausea and vomiting. The Baird government today announced a clinical trial for those who haven't responded well to traditional treatment.
While Woolworths shares picked up after losing ground earlier during trading. 1 Australian dollar is buying 72 US cents and 81 yen.
Well, now to Gavin Morris for a quick look at the weather. And Gav, how's the start of the weekend looking?
Well, it should be a lot cooler along the coast than what we've experienced over the last few days. Still very warm inland. We should see a bit of a drop in temperatures as well. But this weekend, we're going to have a very large, dangerous swell. Let's just go to the charts and we'll see what's happening. We've got two swells gelling here. We've got that monster swell from ex-tropical cyclone Winston in the north, and we've got the new southerly swell that's been linking up with that. So there's going to be a lot of water moving around up and down the coast. So some pretty dangerous rips and currents, etc., for people wanting to hit the beaches. There'll probably be numerous ones closed. We've got some pretty big tides, so we're going to see coastal erosion as well. But I'll take a closer look at the showers and the windier conditions for the coast that are expected over the next couple of days soon.
Thanks, Gav. Coming up, a 50-metre trail of asbestos-laden material dumped near homes.
And in sport, Anthony Watmoe dismisses retirement talk despite a chronic knee injury.
A Sydney council has released security video of asbestos being illegally dumped on a suburban road, hoping it'll lead to the culprits being found. The Mayor of Parramatta wants those responsible paraded in court, and residents are just as fed up.
Time for sport now, and he's been one of rugby league's hardest players. But Anthony Watmoe's time in the game is now in question. The 32-year-old says he's confident a knee complication won't be the end of him, and that retirement is a distant thought.
Coming up later in the bulletin, Hawaii 5-0, the world's best to tackle 50-foot monsters.
And we're live from the ninth season launch with 3 men named to succeed skipper Kurt Gidley.
They say 2 heads are better than 1, but it seems the Newcastle Knights are going 1 better when it comes to their captains. The club is tonight launching its 2016 NRL season in Newcastle. Samuel Jordan joins us live from the launch, and Sam, they've named 3 new skippers. Thank you, Sam. After a troubled Rugby World Cup last year, Israel Folau is back to his fearsome best. The Waratahs flyer endured an injury-ravaged 2015 and is looking to take out his frustration on Queensland in tomorrow night's season opener. Coming up, big names and big scores despite a blown-out conditions at Newcastle's Surf Fest.
Tonight's Sport Report is brought to you by Ladbrokes. Bet better.
Super Snacks. Supermarket sausages put to the ultimate consumer test. How Aldi's brands grilled the opposition. See the results. A current affair next.
Praise for Jared Hayne from the new San Francisco 49ers coach, Chip Kelly, who's revealed he's excited to work with the former league star.
Sully Fitzgibbons and Stephanie Gilmore have continued their progression at Newcastle's Surf Fest today, both winning their heats. They've stepped up against the biggest sides in recent weeks. Now, Jets coach Scott Miller wants his side to put the Mariners' season to the sword in the F3 Derby on Sunday.
I guess for me it will demonstrate that there's progress, but more importantly that the Jets are not focused just on beating the Mariners, but really pushing for the final.
There's lovely play here from Leonardo, just putting it out.
It's official, the Arara Valley Axemen will play in Group 2 this season. It was feared the side didn't have the numbers, but the Axemen will charge into the season with enough players and a new coach.
Taree racehorse trainer Cliff Bashford is confident he could have the top 2 finishers in the biggest race meet hosted in Taree's history. The 1400-metre country championship qualifier has attracted the best horses along the mid-north coast, all vying for the $100,000 prize purse.
Gav has the weather next. Well, Gav's on the spot with the latest weather. Here he is now.
Thank you very much, Paul. Southerly moving up the coast throughout today, mostly just drawing in more humidity. It's still been very warm, but it is going to get a little bit cooler with a little bit of wet weather on the way. Eddie Groot, well, he caught just about every sunset colour possible in this spectacular photo looking west from Jimmy's Beach, just near Hawk's Nest. It is God's country around there, or just north of Port Stephens. We've got showers right across central Australia, in over the Red Centre. We've had some decent storms there firing up, big storms there off to the north and throughout parts parts of Western Australia. All dry for the majority of New South Wales. There was a little bit of drizzle here and there from the southerly that moved on through, just revealing itself, only just a little bit of cloud there along the coast, still really quite hot. That is ex-tropical cyclone Winston spiralling around. Looks like Winston's just going to sit there offshore, and that's going to make sure that the swell peaks throughout tomorrow, because you've got the onshore winds. They'll be building, and therefore the moisture content is going to rise, increased cloud and wet weather on the way throughout tomorrow as that little system moves north. There's another little secondary front that is going to make sure the winds remain quite strong. There's a decent pressure gradient there. That's going to allow all of that swell to jam in up against the east coast, so it's really going to become quite dangerous for most New South Wales beaches. Looking at tomorrow's forecast, still hot in Brisbane. Sydney, it is going to be overcast and wet. That wet weather coming through during the early hours of the morning before it moves north. The capital, the risk of a shower is very small now. Much cooler throughout the southeast, hot in the centre, storms in the north, and the heat is back for Perth. They've had an extraordinarily hot summer. Temperatures today hit the low 30s for just about everyone today. Bit of a scorcher, even up in the tablelands, the high 20s were reached. Further north, also very hot, as I thought last night. Grafton going beyond its forecast maximum, hitting 36 degrees, 35 at Casino. Low 30s were a plenty throughout the northern rivers. Ballina only maxing out at 29 like Tweed Heads. Now, there's our rain for tomorrow. You can see just a little bit. We've got some showers, a burst there tracking up the mid-north coast and extending further north as we move into the evening. In the northern rivers, you've got some rain on the way during the early part of next week with that cyclone or the remnants of hovering offshore. It's all going to be pushing in from Monday, so we're getting really quite wet from here on in. Looking at the winds out of the southeast, and quite gusty, quite strong. In fact, strong wind warnings have been issued. Cooler but humid, cloudy and showery. Burst of showers coming through. Maybe some little heavy local falls and maybe some storms as well. Some little cells certainly possible. It's just slightly unstable, so particularly around the mountain areas, you might see a little bit of storm action throughout tomorrow. Still very warm and humid for the northern rivers, despite that southeasterly driving through. The southerlies just have not been that cold at all this year. The swell, big, dangerous, up to 3 metres. Bigger in the north. The south is still going to be quite chunky because there's two swells running. You've got the northerly off ex-Winston, and you've got that southerly swell as well. So two dangerous swells gelling together. You've got a low tide there really early at 20 to 6 and the high there at about 10 to 12. And we've got some pretty big tides. Overnight tides, we're going to have coastal erosion on our hands here across the weekend, so be prepared for that if you're on the coast. Sun's up at about 6:35, down at 7:25. That moon now is waning away. Look, it's not looking good for offshore boating. Could not recommend it at all, to be quite honest. Large, dangerous swell, a lot of water moving around, strong rips, currents, choppy seas. We'll have those gusty onshore winds. Protected waters, by far the best, so take care. We've had a number of accidents with people taking on bars when they shouldn't have over the last few weeks. Looking at this long-range forecast, Lismore, Northern Rivers, we've got rain on the way. We're going to see potentially some decent numbers here as we move into the early part of next week. I think those estimates right there, well, they're probably under towards the coast. You'll be getting some decent falls for all of those coastal communities in between the Tweed down to Coffs. It is going to be really quite wet into the early part of next week. Monday, Tuesday looking particularly wet, so I think everything there is greater than it suggests. Your percentage and chances of rain and also the numbers, I think they'll be quite up there. For Taree, the mid-north coast, you'll have a decent burst of showers move through during tomorrow, and then it's actually going to ease off for the mid-north coast as we move into the early middle part of next week. Surf as well, it's on. Big waves, wind-blown, affected. It's going to be somewhat choppy out there. Water temperatures have still been relatively warm for most locations, but that really sums up the picture there. It's going to be pretty big. It's going to be dangerous. Fit surfers, but on the bright side, if you're fit enough and ready to take it on, those big southern point breaks will be offering some epic waves. Need to catch up on a local story? All you have to do is log on.
Thanks, Gav. Finally tonight, hurricane-force winds have produced incredible waves on Hawaii's North Shore for the famed Eddie Aikau Invitational.
Just cool. Plain scary.
Yeah. Cowabunga for sure.
Spirit of Eddie lives on.
That is the latest news.
Have a great weekend.
Good night.
Good night.